Lockout-tagout. It's the installation of locks and tags on energy isolation devices to ensure work can be performed safely. The locks and tags ensure that the energy isolation devices and the machine, equipment, or systems they isolate or control cannot be operated until the locks and tags are removed. The purpose of this is to establish procedures for the safe control of energy through locking and tagging of equipment or circuits at any of our equipment, buildings, whatever systems we have with energy in them on town of Gray properties. This is going to apply particularly to those who are doing the lockout and the tag out, that are going to be doing the maintenance, the work on the equipment. However, almost everybody else, if not everybody else in this room, may come across this at some point or another. And we'll define who's supposed to have part of this and who's just supposed to know that they shouldn't touch it. The authorized employee is the trained employee who locks out or tags out the machines or equipment in order to service, maintain, or render safe from causing further damage or injury. All authorized town employees have successfully completed the required training. Now, in Public Works, that's going to be the mechanics. Fire department has lockout, tag out on the ladder truck for something they may come in contact with in any site in the town of Gray. The equipment will have a stored energy that can be a problem if it's not rendered out of service. Now, when something is locked out, the machine that is operated by somebody is now, that somebody is the affected person. So an affected person is anyone whose job requires him or her to operate or use a machine or equipment in which servicing or maintenance is being performed under lockout and tagout, or whose job requires him or her to work in an area in which such servicing or maintenance is being performed. An affected worker cannot perform work under a lockout-tagout permit. An affected person can also be a resident that is affected by a circuit that will have been locked out. Now we have procedures that are going to be specific to what's being locked out by the authorized person. So there's going to be equipment in Public Works, loaders or trucks that are going to be serviced. Those are going to have specific procedures for those machines. Now this applies also to electrical and whatnot, so you may come across this in any one of these buildings if there's a breaker that's locked out or a switch that's locked out. So the procedure is to notify all affected employees that servicing or maintenance is required on a machine or equipment, and that the machine or equipment must be shut down and locked out to perform the servicing or maintenance. The authorized employee shall refer to the company procedure to identify the type and magnitude of the energy and that the machine or equipment utilizes, shall understand the hazards of the energy, and shall know the methods to control the energy. There's going to be different lockout devices for these different types of energies. We'll go over that later. If the machine or equipment is operating, shut it down by the normal stopping procedure to press the stop button, open switches, close valves, etc. Deactivate the energy isolating devices so that the machine or equipment is isolated from the energy source. Lock out the energy isolating device with assigned individual locks. That's something that the authorized person doing the lockout is going to have possession of their own locks. Stored or residual energy such as that in capacitors, springs, elevated machine members, rotating flywheels, hydraulic systems, air, gas, steam, or water pressure must be dissipated or restrained by methods such as grounding, repositioning, blocking, bleeding down, etc. Ensure that the equipment is disconnected from the energy sources by first checking that no personnel are exposed, then verify the isolation of the equipment by operating the push button or other normal operating control, or by testing to make certain the equipment will not operate. Return the operating controls to neutral after you've done this test. The machine or equipment is now locked out. Now that's the lockout. On top of that, you need to have a tag with your lock that states a lot of important information. We'll go over that too when we show the devices.
Like an example of this would be what? Like someone in the fire department using a chainsaw, or trying to get a context?
Anything that has a stored energy. So a machine that could be started up, you need to be able to lock out some portion of that that is going to keep it from starting up. Specifically in a vehicle, taking the key out, locking up the key.
Disconnecting a battery before you're doing electrical work on a front-end loader.
Correct.
Okay.
And you need to lock those devices so that somebody can't come along and hook it back up again and take off with it. That's the portion, that's the purpose of the lock. And we have specific devices used to lock different types of things. I'll show those later. When restoring the equipment back to service, when you're done with your maintenance and the lockout is to be terminated. When the servicing or maintenance is complete and the machine or equipment is ready to return to normal operating condition, the following steps must be taken. Check the machine and equipment and immediate area around the machine to ensure that non-essential items have been removed and that the machine or equipment components are operationally intact. Make sure that your wrenches are out of the way of the fan. Check the work area to ensure that all employees have been safely positioned or removed from the area. Verify the controls are in neutral. Remove the lockout devices and re-energize the machine or equipment. And removal of some forms of blocking may require re-energization of the machine before safe removal. We have loaders that have blocking sleeves go over the hydraulic rams that lift the moving portions of the loader. When you rest the machine back on those blocks so that it can't drop the bucket on somebody or whatever, you need to energize, you can start the machine back up and lift the loader all the way up so you can remove the locking sleeves. That's what they're talking about for some things. You need to start it up again to remove the safety devices. Notify affected employees that the operation is complete and the machine or equipment is ready for use. Now we got a splendid little video so that you can watch something besides me.
Energy. It's essential in the workplace.
I was told you can't because resolution is a problem.
Because energy is always around us, we may take it for granted and underestimate the potential hazards.
I was told no.
Accidental release of stored energy can happen in a second, but the injuries can last forever. The good news is, when proper safety procedures are followed, these accidents are preventable. That's the purpose of a safety lockout-tagout program. Let's take a deeper look at lockout-tagout. Why we need it, who's affected by it, and the steps to safely apply and remove lockout devices to isolate hazardous energy prior to and after equipment servicing and maintenance. A wide variety of machines and equipment is used daily in industrial environments, but never forget the potential danger. Machines require energy to operate. Energy that's potentially hazardous to workers if not properly controlled during maintenance procedures. The consequences can last a lifetime. Hazardous energy comes in many different forms, such as electrical, mechanical, hydraulic, pneumatic, chemical, thermal, or other energy. All these energy types can unexpectedly start up equipment if not controlled. That's why the energy sources need to be identified and locked, blocked, or released before anyone services the equipment. Each year, nearly 10% of all serious workplace accidents result from the failure to properly control hazardous energy. In fact, failure to correctly perform lockout-tagout ranks in the top 10 citations every year. To help keep employees safe, lockout procedures are a combination of processes and products to isolate energy sources to machinery. Lockout procedures keep equipment energy sources from activating when you don't want them to, especially during maintenance, where employees are vulnerable to injury or death. In addition, effective lockout-tagout procedures minimize downtime and protect expensive equipment. Procedures ensure that machines are correctly shut down and restarted, avoiding equipment damage from incorrect shutdown or unexpected startup. The federal law that governs lockout-tagout is an OSHA standard for the control of hazardous energy. The law spells out requirements to disable equipment and prevent release of stored hazardous energy during maintenance. The primary focus is on general industry, but the OSHA standard also applies to other work environments. OSHA has specific standards for marine terminals, longshoring, and the construction industry. In addition, other industry-specific safety organizations exist, such as MSHA, the Mine Safety and Health Administration. The OSHA standard applies to businesses in any of these situations. When an employee is required to remove or bypass a guard or other safety device. When an employee is required to place any part of their body in contact with the point of operation of the machine. Or when an employee is required to place any part of their body into a danger zone associated with a machine operating cycle. OSHA has established the following general guidelines for lockout-tagout devices. Lotto devices must be manufactured from durable materials to withstand the industrial environment of their use. They must be substantial enough to prevent removal without the use of excessive force. They must clearly identify the employee who installed the device. They must be standardized within the facility by color, shape, and/or size. They must be singularly identified. Only lockout-tagout devices are to be used to control energy. And lockout-tagout devices cannot be used for any purpose other than controlling energy. Never use them to lock a toolbox, locker, storage area, ladder, or other items. Lockout impacts a variety of workers at a facility. The three categories are authorized employees. These are the workers specifically trained to lock out or tag out equipment in order to service or maintain the unit. Affected employees are the ones who work with or near the equipment being serviced. They are trained to recognize the lockout but not perform it. And other employees are those who work in or near an area where lockout-tagout may be used. They also need to be instructed to recognize lockout but not perform the lockout procedure. There are four key components to an effective energy control program. Beyond having sufficient safety padlocks and lockout devices on hand, there needs to be machine-specific lockout procedures, inspections, audits, and employee training. Machine-specific lockout procedures outline the specific steps and requirements that an authorized employee needs to complete to safely lock out a piece of equipment. This includes posting the procedure at the equipment location for easy reference. OSHA requires annual inspections and audits. Inspections ensure that employees are correctly following the energy control procedures. Audits verify that the written procedures correctly describe the steps to isolate the equipment's energy sources. And the fourth element of the program, employers are required to train their employees to make sure they understand and can follow lockout procedures. Retraining is required to maintain proficiency. Whenever an employee has a new job assignment, whenever control methods change, such as new steps due to equipment modification, revised steps for a procedure change.
Or right now.
Every piece of equipment must have its own particular procedure for lockout. It may mean locking out a circuit breaker, locking a valve in the off position, or using a disconnect switch, to name a few. In general, there are 7 steps for safe lockout-tagout. First, prepare for shutdown. Locate all the energy sources that power the equipment. Each source is identified on the machine's lockout procedure. Next, notify all affected employees that you're ready to start a lockout procedure. Step 3, stop the equipment by following its normal shutdown procedure. Step 4. Isolate the equipment by turning off the energy at the main power source. Step 5. Apply a lock and appropriate lockout device to each energy isolating device. Each lockout point that is detailed in the lockout procedure. For example, a gate valve needs a gate valve cover. The lock or tag that goes with it must clearly indicate who applied the lockout device. If several people are going to work on a piece of equipment, each one must apply his or her own lock to the isolation device. This ensures that the energy source will remain off until each employee removes his or her lock. Step 6. Release or secure any stored energy. This may involve draining valves, releasing hydraulic pressure, blocking moving parts, or however it's detailed in your company's procedures. Step 7. Verify the power is shut off by trying to restart the machine. Once verified, return the machine's switch to the off position. After the service work is finished, there are 5 steps to release the equipment from lockout-tagout. First, make sure all tools have been removed and all machine guards are back in place. Check that all employees are clear of the machine. If you can't see inside a piece of equipment, take a head count. Remove the lockout-tagout devices. Each person must remove his or her own lock and tag. Before you restart the equipment, notify all affected employees that the lockout-tagout devices have been removed. And finally, restore energy to the equipment in the order indicated by the lockout procedure. A high percentage of accidents happen just after shift changes. It's often due to a lack of communication. That's why you should meet at the lockout-tagout device with the person you're relieving. And then, before you leave, meet with the person who's relieving you. In general, if a piece of equipment is locked out at a shift change, the person on the next shift has to apply his lock before you can remove yours. If for some reason the person who applied the lock is not available, the supervisor may remove the lock and tag by following the company's pre-established written procedure. The supervisor must verify that the employee who applied the lock is not at the job site and make reasonable efforts to reach the employee. Before that employee returns to work, the employer must let him know the lock or tag has been removed and the equipment is no longer de-energized. Working around hazardous energy can be safe, but only when everyone takes responsibility for their part in the safety lockout-tagout program. It starts with the employer, who establishes the safety lockout procedures and conducts training, audits, and inspections. And safety also depends on employees to learn and follow the procedures for lockout-tagout each and every time.
The locks and tags you saw in the video, we have in several departments. They're going to look like this. If you couldn't see it in the video, here's an only smaller one. Importantly, the name and the date of the person that is doing the lockout. Their lock is also supposed to have their name on it, it's their lock. If multiple people are going to perform work on this, say, Mike, you locked out a machine, but you got a contractor coming to work on it, you're going to use one of these devices that's going to be able to add locks to. The electrical panels that have a built-in hasp to them, they're large enough that you can put several locks in. But again, we have these for multiple people doing a lockout. The breakers, there's the large pole and also the smaller ones that you're probably more familiar with for the residential, your typical 110 size breakers. They're going to basically pinch the moving part of the breaker, the switch portion of it, and then there's a part that covers and locks, so that cannot be turned back on again. There are a generic cable type which you're gonna wrap around. This can be used for a number of different applications. Wrap around whatever you need to immobilize, and it feeds into itself and lock is placed into it. We have the valve cover that they showed. That can get locked up with that. Gate valves that, or sorry, ball valves that have the handle on water and steam pipes and whatnot. We have this type that goes over the handle and then gets locked. The other gate valves with the handle, the round handle, like the your Silcox, shall we say, that you'll see on your house for your garden hose. That sized valve, the handle gets unthreaded. This ring goes on behind it. You thread the handle back on, and then the cover goes over it. That locks. Electrical cords, if you have a device, a lathe or a table saw or something like that, that you need to lock up the cord, basically you unplug it and you're going to feed it through, stick the end of the cord right in there, that gets locked up. The methods by which these get utilized are important to the authorized and trained individual, not everybody here. However, everybody here might come across it. You should recognize these things. So this is the important information that if you need to contact somebody about it being locked out, take a look at the tag. Any questions? Splendid.